As we predicted right here on the Nonprofits, a federal judge has put a hold on Louisiana's recently passed law, HB 71, which makes it mandatory to display the Ten Commandments in all classrooms, ruling that the law's opponents actually have shown sufficient reason for why it may be unconstitutional. Alana Odoms, the executive director of the ACLU of Louisiana, responded to the ruling by saying, with so many aspects of democracy, I think, in peril, it feels really reassuring and affirming that the federal court really articulated a very clear and strong First Amendment right that shall not be violated. However, Louisiana's Attorney General has appealed the stay order and added that he strongly disagrees with the court's decision and will immediately repeal, saying this is far from over. Now, one of the major concerns about the laws are the dangers of overturning the Establishment Clause of the Constitution and opening the possibility of people being discriminated against because of their religion by the very government that was supposed to protect them. Now, this story is from CNN by Lauren Mascarenas and Isabel Rosales. I'm hoping I got the first woman's name correctly. It was published November 12th, 2024. And I want to hand it off to Cindy. Are you worried that American judges will ignore the Constitution in lieu of religious doctrine?
Yes, I'm not feeling very optimistic about this one, to be honest. It looks designed to go to the Supreme Court, and it probably will. And when it's there, I suspect the very radicalized judges will find a way to undermine the current precedent for as far as they think they can get away with. In 2014, I said that the US would be a theocracy in the next 30 years, and I got laughed at that time. Now I'm afraid it won't take even half that time. There is a concerted effort from some states to do the same thing Louisiana is trying to do, like Oklahoma, for example. I recently watched the superintendent in Oklahoma express extremely similar views in an interview. And what I find interesting is that in the last 10 years where I started looking into the US from the outside, I noticed that despite its image of one united country, there is a constant struggle, like some kind of try to find a balance between federal and state power. And I'm afraid that the current balance is going to shift significantly in the next 4 years, because you have a Supreme Court that cannot be trusted and losing pretty much all legitimacy. You have a president pushing an authoritarian agenda, which means very, very much centralized power, which means very small federal government, which means that the states will have to compensate. You have an extreme polarization from state to state on fundamental issues. You have a large difference between what the Republican Party is trying to implement and what the population actually wants, even the people who identify as Republican. And you have states, especially governors, who are trying to organize themselves already right now, today. So because of all this, it feels like this balance is about to tip in a very different way than it does today. So I think it's something to watch in the next weeks, next month, because, I think it's going to change.
And John, since we're talking about the courts and religious rulings, do you think that they've overlooked obvious religious violations of the Constitution? And if so, why do you think that is?
I know for sure that they have been violating the Constitution and federal laws and regulations on a regular basis. A lot of these lawsuits are obviously unconstitutional. I'm glad that the judge saw the obvious in this particular case. It's not at all a sure thing anymore, depending on whether you're in the 11th Circuit or you're in the 5th Circuit. It just depends on who you're judge shopping for to get these up before an obviously corrupt Supreme Court. So I'm kind of heartsick that this judge was true to his oath, but the conservatives are not true to their oaths and have destroyed the credibility of the court system on top of it, mainly due to the machinations of the Federalist Society. I'm just really, really heartsick that our republic is, our constitutional democracy, I should say, is failing to uphold its own rules. This used to be a country governed by laws. I'm not so sure that's true anymore. If this is overturned, I will be more than heartbroken. That will destroy the last shred of integrity the Supreme Court has, which it doesn't have much left. And I will lose any trust I have in the fairness of our courts and the rule of law as it stands in this country. That's saying a lot for me because I'm a patriot. I've always been a patriot. I served my country and I love my country. That's why it's tearing me up to see this kind of bullshit actually be promulgated as the right stuff to do. It's not. But this decision is the right decision. I am not excited that he did what was obvious. In other words, I'm not patting him on the back for doing his duty. I would be excited and angry if he had not. I celebrate the ACLU and the FFRF and their constant vigil to challenge these kinds of un-American activities. I'll give them a bravo Zulu, a well done. But I can't express any more disgust for the people trying to destroy this country and turn it into what they want it to be rather than what it's been for 250 years.
AJ, there's been another battle in courts over government vouchers being used to pay tuitions at religious schools. Now, how do you think this Ten Commandments law relates to that?
It's all about advancing religion, and not just any religion, but Christian nationalism specifically. And Louisiana's Republican governor, Jeff Landry, he's a Roman Catholic, but he seems to want his state to be at the forefront of this Christian nationalist movement. That was his goal when he signed the Ten Commandments law, requiring all public schools and all state-funded university classrooms to display this poster-sized state-approved version of the Ten Commandments in very large and easily readable font, because obviously it has to be out there front and center, right? It seems that they can't get the voucher programs to funnel at these children into religious educational facilities. So they're trying to bring religion into the public schools now. And I'm glad to see that these non-secular families are fighting for the separation of church and state in public schools, especially, and other public spaces.
You mentioned Catholics, and Landry was a Catholic. And I just wanted to point out that 6 of the judges on the Supreme Court are Catholic as well. 6. So, I mean,
five conservative and 1 liberal.
Yeah. Yeah. Cindy, as a non-American, thankfully for you in this instance, where you're from, you don't get that. You have departments, not states, as I recall. And do they have any kind of power at all, or are they completely reliant on the federal government there?
No, religion is completely separated from the state. They have some funding, but it's the same for all religions. But it's very limited influence. In any case, the 17th and 18th century in France have been very hard for Christianity in general, because all those philosophers, they were not very friends with Christianity. So religion in France is very much limited to the private circle. It's still alive, but it's really, really limited in there. Also, it doesn't have much strength in terms of political force. And it's the same in Belgium, where I currently live. I discovered recently that some of my soccer in my team, they are Christians. But their belief doesn't enforce anything into their life. They're not anti-abortion. They're not. It's unlike anything you can see in the U.S. It's mostly cultural theists. Some of them believe in God and go to church, but it's very limited, and it's more about the community. The beliefs themselves, they are very much in the background, so they don't have any impact the beliefs. I mean, they don't have any impact on the society. Nothing is decided on whether or not it agrees with religion or not. It's just not in the discussions.
John, do you feel the courts have or will betray your trust in the future? And how do you think the American public as a whole sees that problem?
I can't speak for the American public, but I can take a guess. As far as me, I think that the courts will, of course, break my trust because they're supposed to enforce the first 10 amendments, all the amendments, as well as the Constitution. And it looks like they're prepared to overstep that bounds again in order to save themselves from whatever scrutiny on the conservative side that they might get for doing something that would support the actual United States. So I don't have a lot of faith that I'm not going to have a problem with just about anything they decide. They have surprised me on occasion. They've actually done the right thing. What really got my goat was presidential immunity. There's an actual passage in the Constitution that says exactly the opposite. So, that kind of tells me that they really don't care what they're looking at. They're just going to make up their minds and think of some obtuse reason why they should think that way. It's actually almost criminal, given that they're all, at least two of them we know are on the take for billionaires. It's like, I have no more faith in the court system. I see all the time people being railroaded, police not being held accountable for violations of the constitutional rights of citizens. I just see that. I worked in a sheriff's department. None of the people I worked with 30 years ago would even dream of doing the kinds of things I'm hearing about now. They were all legitimately good people and legitimately good cops and some great deputies. These guys, they really knew their stuff. I am not so sure that we have too many, especially the higher ranking police officers, the sheriffs themselves, and the police chiefs, who are really thinking through what is going on with their particular things, and that the justice system itself, the courts, are not reliable as a stop to political mayhem. We are in for a rough. I'm sorry to be so Debbie Downer on this stuff, but I really feel deep in my heart, facsimile, that there is a serious problem that needs to be fixed, and the conservatives are not going to fix it. They're making it worse.
I want to get back to the actual story that we're talking about for a moment, about the law that we're talking about. The similar Ten Commandments law was passed was struck down in Kentucky back in 1980. 3 other states currently have proposed a similar law. None have been implemented, possibly because it's a blatant violation of the Constitution. But those 3 states are Texas, of course, Utah, of course, and Oklahoma, of course. I am always worried when we're pushing something like this in a classroom. What are the Jewish kids going to say? What are the Muslim kids in the school going to say? Why aren't we putting up the 5 pillars of Islam on the wall for those students? Why isn't there a law for that? And from what I really see is this is not an attempt to do anything but push a religious agenda and a religious morality on young minds that are open to suggestion. So this to me is really heinous. It's really heinous. And I want to ask AJ, in the past, you've expressed where you think religion should be taught. Can you share those thoughts with us now?
For me, there is a place for religious education, and it's definitely not school. And there is a place for secular education. And, we don't bring that to church, right? So in this specific case, the families of several students of different faiths, some of them were families that had more than one faith within the same family, right? Multi-faith families. And these families reached out to ACLU to help them with the fight because they felt that it was a direct infringement of religious freedom and a violation of the First Amendment, which, as we've mentioned, is very clear as far as violations. This should protect all U.S. citizens' freedom of religion. And to me, more important than freedom of religion is freedom from religion, okay? Because we want these places to stay secular. One of the family members from one of the students said, as an interfaith family, we expect our children to receive their secular education in public school and their religious education at home and within our faith communities, not from the government officials. And I absolutely love this sentiment. I will be happy to stop talking about the harms of religion if people follow this type of thought process. Religious education belongs at home. We can even do without the church teachings. Keep it at home, behind closed doors. Obviously, there are instances where this can become a problem, like if we have strictly religious homeschoolers. But if we're talking about a publicly schooled child who is being taught the basics of religion at home, then it's generally a lot less harmful than school and church indoctrination happening all at once, because these kids are in public school, they're being taught the religion at home. So yeah, I think that we absolutely need to separate the religious education, the secular education. Just keep the religion out of the schools, please.
It always seems like it's members of the Republican Party trying to pass these laws, and I'm not sure that a majority of their voters would agree with many of these, nor do I think those voters have fully caught on to what a lot of these politicians want to change this country into, a right-wing Christian theocracy. I know there's a lot of people that go along with it, but I think a lot of the people who are voting for the GOP are not really okay with this type of policy. I wanted to ask everybody, and I'm going to ask everybody, real quick answer. Do you think that the GOP voters are eventually going to catch on to what their leaders or their politicians are doing here? At least some of their politicians are doing here. And I'll start with
John.
I was talking about how I don't think a lot of the GOP voters are okay with pushing this Christian agenda. And I was wondering if you thought they were going to wake up to this idea, or if some of the voters, because some of them are for it, let's face it.
Yeah, a lot of the evangelical churches are the ones that are shouting this the loudest. However, I think a lot of Republicans, and I know a few of them actually, who are going to or have already decided that this isn't the direction they want to go in. And I'm afraid there will be more of them as things progress. But let's just hope it's not too late. And there's always hope that one day they'll wake up. But you see, there's an awful lot of the base that's turned into the base that wasn't there 15 years ago or 16 years ago, that was brought into the party since then, that are poorly educated, easily swayed by conspiracy theories and otherwise. And that group, that base is not going to change. Until they have been totally destroyed politically, then they'll change. But as far as the actual Republicans, there's lots of Republican groups that are now in opposition. So let's wait and see where that goes, All
right. It was supposed to be a quick answer, John. AJ?
I never have quick answers.
I'll make it quick. I think there's going to be a mixed bag. I think there's going to be people that were all for it and are going to be very happy that all of these things are being enacted. But I think there's also going to be a lot of people who are going to be very disappointed in the more strict Christian nationalist ideals that are going to be put in place. And yeah, they're not going to be happy with that when their liberties are taken away that they don't agree with.
All right. Thanks. And I think Cindy had something she wanted to say on a different topic. So I'm going to give her the last word.
Yes. We've talked about several people who were trying to impose their religion. And one of them was Catholic and some others are evangelical. So let's get back in history a little bit. There was one religion until the press was invented. And that was the Catholic religion. Then when people started to read the Bible, they started to realize that, they didn't like what the Catholics were trying to teach because it was too different from the Bible. And that's when the schism between Catholic and Protestants started to appear. So when people were able to read themselves the Bible, they started to disagree. And then in the early 1910s, there was this movement in the US called the Fundamentals, where about 50 intellectuals decided that they thought the evangelical movement, the Protestants weren't strict enough. So they went to the fundamentals, and that's where the word fundamentalism comes from and applies to religion oppression. So what happens when Catholics decide that Catholicism is the state religion in the US? What happens to evangelicals?
I've been saying
that that happened through history. There's no reason why it doesn't happen again. Exactly, and so it's so frustrating that the education system, the public education system in the US has been destroyed, because that's information that would be very, very relevant to teach today.
I've been kind of saying that all along because as I mentioned, the Supreme Court has 6 Catholics on it, and I think you're going to get a lot of Protestant evangelicals that go to SCOTUS thinking they're going to get rulings in their favor. And of course they will get some, but I don't think they're going to get everything that they want because of the Catholicism ruling the courts. I thought this was a really good segment. If you want to hear more from the nonprofits, just click right here.